like to see it. So thank you very much for coming to our session on Living and Learning 2E, What Teens Say. And if you don't mind keeping your mute on, and we're going to have a really good Q&A session at the end, then you can ask lots of questions then. And I'm just going to admit another person here. So hello, I am Callie Turk. I am the co-founder of a local advocacy group called REAL. And I am joined today by Serena Chen, who is finishing her senior year at St. Francis High School and is also the founder of Neurodiversity. We are supposed to also be joined by Ava Miller, who is a Palo Alto Unified alumna. She finished up through the middle college program, and was a Gunn High School student. She's currently a freshman at Sarah Lawrence College, and we will hope she will pop in later to share her points of view as well. So before we jumped in, I just wanted to make sure you knew who REAL is and why we are doing this presentation. So REAL stands for Resilience and Engagement for Every Learner, and we support 2E or twice exceptional kids by building bridges between their educators and their parents. So we spend a lot of our time with educators raising awareness about the fact that there are twice exceptional kids and helping to develop their understanding of how to serve these kids better. We provide resources so that school can be a place that 2E learners can be successful and go to school and feel successful every day. And for parents, we disseminate and create 2E resources online and in person, because we want to help parents be able to advocate for their children more effectively and support their 2E kids, primarily at school, but also at home. So our plan for today is I'm going to do a very, very brief overview of what 2E is, in case any of you who've come aren't familiar with the term. Then I'm going to do a quick overview of the blog series that we put together and sort of why we did it, what motivated us, and who our bloggers are. I'm going to then go over the key themes from the blog series, and Serena is going to be hopping in and out and letting us know her points of view for the things that we came up with. And then we will have time for Q&A. I have a few questions for Serena and Ava if she's able to join us. And we'll close, and we'll open up for you as well to have questions. And then we will close with some ideas on how you could get involved, or if you have a teenager who's twice exceptional, how they could get involved with our work. So before we jump in, I just want to make sure everyone is working with the same definition of what it means to be 2E or twice exceptional. So twice exceptional kids are the ones who have really distinguishing strengths. So they may have a high ability in a specific area, or they may have high abilities in many areas, or they may be really creative or have great potential, but they also have very complex challenges. So they might have a specific learning disability like dyslexia or dysgraphia or dyscalculia. They might have ADHD. They might have a general anxiety disorder or autism. So when you see these two things together, that's a twice exceptional student. And it's very interesting because I actually listened to a presentation yesterday from the Schwab Learning Center at Stanford that hosted a young woman who is in her mid-20s and is dyslexic. And she admitted that she went most of her life believing that you could not have both strengths and challenges. So this is a common misunderstanding that people have, and it's really these very complex children that help us see that these things can go together, and it can be a complicated life when they do. So as part of our work at REAL, we really wanted to highlight the voices of the twice exceptional and neurodivergent. We hosted a panel last fall for the Stanford Neurodiversity Project, where we were able to have 6 different neurodivergent youth speak out about their experiences. And we really realized the power of having them be able to really say in their own voices what their experiences are like. And we felt like it would be really helpful for parents and teachers to hear their stories and to get specific tips about what they could do to support them. So we launched our Living and Learning 2E blog series, and really wanted to give these kids a voice in what their experiences have been like. And the URL is below if you want to see it, and I'll put it in the chat later. And we will hopefully be posting this recording so you can always refer back to it. Once we had the blog posts, we have 6 right now. We wanted to look across all of the posts and see what were some of the themes that came out that were common across all of our bloggers, because there really are quite a lot of common themes that we can learn from by listening to each of their voices and then putting them together. And we wrote an article for 2E News that really outlines in detail what those themes are. And if you'd like to see that article, you can go to 2E News and read it. You have to register, but it's free. And this presentation really draws on this article. So before we jump into the themes, I wanted you to know who you're hearing from. We are so proud of each of these young people for sharing their stories so authentically and openly. They are each just such interesting and amazing people that I couldn't be more excited to tell you about them. So our very first blogger used a pseudonym named Chris. And Chris is a former PAUSD student who just is a super analytical, deep thinker, really a kind-hearted young man. He runs role-playing games for younger students, but he has really debilitating anxiety, stemming from his autism and his ADHD, and also just a lot of school trauma that he experienced through the years from people not really understanding his complex learning needs. For each of the bloggers, we sort of pulled out one key quote that we thought really highlighted something special about their contribution. So Chris, his key contribution was, if I've scored well on an exam, but am behind in assignments, allow the flexibility to just let me move on, since I've shown mastery of the content. So one thing you might notice as we go through these is that a lot of the advice we have is for the teachers, but as a parent, I think for you to understand what the experience has been like for the kids, so that when you go to talk to your children's teachers, you have a deeper perspective on what is needed, and to be building that bridge for your student to do better in school. One of our other bloggers, and our youngest blogger, is Mike, who went through Palo Alto for K through 8 and just started at a private high school for 9th grade. Mike is someone I've known since he was 5 and is an incredibly eloquent young person. I actually interviewed him for his blog post because he has dysgraphia, so he didn't feel as comfortable just doing the basic writing. And his ability to just think on his feet eloquently is just incredible. And he's also really incredibly imaginative and musical, performs with several different bands. So Mike has both ADHD and dysgraphia. And he, being a little younger, was more thinking about his own identity. Like, I don't want me being smart or me having disabilities to be part of who I am in any way possible. I'd rather just ignore them. Mike was definitely more at that I just want to blend in stage of life. Lucy is a Nueva School alumna, and she's actually a current Stanford student, and she was on our panel at the Stanford Neurodiversity Project. And I learned so much from her about what it can take to support someone who has high anxiety and perfectionism. So Lucy is a very creative writer. She knows several languages. She talks about just kind of her endless, boundless curiosity and need to learn. But she, very late in high school, maybe it was even before she went to college, learned that she was autistic. So she had struggled with anxiety for a long time, but then finally received her autism diagnosis. And she reflected, I've learned to leverage my strengths, remain aware of my weaknesses, set realistic expectations, and find the middle ground between soul-crushing rigidity and chaotic spontaneity. And one of the things I really loved about Lucy was she said now that she knows herself better, Like she's fine if she goes to bed at 9 p.m. Even if it's not what everyone else is doing, that's what she needs to do. So I really respect her advocacy for herself and her needs. Noah is a young man who lives out in Pacifica and attends Summit Public Schools. And he's just this really dynamic person. I highly encourage you to read all of these blogs. Noah's got just a dynamic personality. He's really into cars and photography and extreme sports. He has both autism and ADHD. And I really loved this quote where he just really brings it to life. I hope that everywhere I go, I can help others realize that 2E people aren't a joke, but more like superhumans held back by mental chains. And you can just see him working to break those chains. So Ava, who I hope may still join us, but we'll have to see, is a Palo Alto Unified alumna. She finished her junior and senior years with the middle college program. She's currently a first-year student at Sarah Lawrence College. She really loves environmental studies and writing and hiking and embroidery, but she really was struggling a lot with anxiety and perfectionism. And she didn't realize that was what was happening for her midway through high school. And she really commented on the change that can happen for 2E learners, that being a twice exceptional learner was a quality that got me into accelerated reading and advanced math classes, because in elementary school, learning is about learning. Sadly, this is something I found changes over time. And that's one of the key things we'll talk about is how the 2E experience from these 6 bloggers' perspective changed over time. So our 6th, last but definitely not least blogger is Serena, who's with us today. And she was a public school student in the Cupertino system from kindergarten through 8th grade. And as I mentioned before, is graduating from St. Francis High School this year. I definitely encourage you to read Serena's blog post. You'll hear all about how much she loves her trumpet and music, how important running is to her, and just really great language, such good language, and just really brings it to life. And she's the founder of a website called Neurodiversity, which she'll talk about later, and also has ADHD. And her quote that I will highlight, and then I'll see if she would like to add anything before we move on, is, just because a student may appear outwardly high achieving doesn't necessarily mean that they don't need any extra support. We've learned to mask this and often compensate in terrible ways. Serena, did you want to add anything to your introduction?
Yeah, sure. So thank you, Kelly, for the introduction and also the invitation to be here. I'm Serena. I have ADHD and I'm a senior at St. Francis. And prior to that, I attended Murdoch Patel Elementary School and Miller Middle School. I've been playing trumpet for 8 years now, and I've played in multiple ensembles throughout high school. And I also had the privilege of speaking at the Stanford Neurodiversity Summit last fall. And as Kelly mentioned, I'm also the founder of the Neurodiversity online resource platform and student community, which I launched due to the stigma and also lack of accessible neurodiverse student groups around. And yeah, I'm very excited to be here today.
Yeah, I'm so excited you're here too. Thank you very much, Serena. All right, so we'll jump into the themes now. And the first one is around, what does it feel like to be 2Es? We have a whole format of list of questions that we ask everyone to answer. And one of them is like, what does that feel like for you? And one of the things we found is that it really evolves over time for most of the kids. So in elementary school, a lot of our bloggers felt like they were strong students, or they received a lot of praise for their ability to do certain academic things. Some of them felt like it was just normal, because when they're that age, they just don't think that much about how they're fitting in the context of other kids. But then several started to mention, as the time went by, how misunderstood they felt. A lot of teachers not understanding why they were behaving a certain way, or why they could do some things really easily and not other things really easily, or maybe their family misunderstood them and their behavior. So that was sort of what elementary school looked like for most of our bloggers. And then in the middle grade years and early high school, they started to feel more frustrated. They started to feel a lot more negative feelings. They may be more paralyzed by the workload. Some of them started to feel really hopeless, or their anxiety spiked. They would start to think they were stupid because they couldn't do things maybe as well as they had in the past, or they weren't able to keep up with the workload that was happening. Sometimes they would get referred for special education services and they would just feel embarrassed about tapping into those resources. And then as they moved through the late high school years and some of them into college, you actually see many of the bloggers coming to understand their unique set of strengths and needs, learning how to advocate for themselves, really selecting and designing situations that support them in their personal development and growth, and having more confidence to speak up for themselves and others. So there's this sense that they have become more empowered, more hopeful, more fully integrated as people and as whole people. One thing we did really note is that the boys, we had 3 boys and 3 girls, and the boys were diagnosed earlier. Almost, I think all 3 of the girls, and this is not uncommon, were not diagnosed with a learning difference until they were in high school or later. And really getting the diagnosis seemed to help the 3 female bloggers to understand themselves better and understand the experiences that they had had. So that's something we'll actually be presenting about too on the May 15th session. We will be having a whole session on neurodiversity through the female lens, if that's something that is interesting to anyone who's here today. So I have a quote on this topic from Lucy, and that is, just knowing that I was autistic gave me the confidence to make decisions based on what was best for me rather than what seemed normal. So Serena, I don't know if you want to weigh in on this particular theme about sort of how your experience evolved over time.
Yeah, so definitely for me personally, diagnosis was the aha moment that I never seemed to actually achieve in school. So neurodiversity wasn't like the negative sentence that the school administration or like my parents perceived it as when first presented with the concept. And it wasn't actually like a barrier. It's honestly just opened up so many doors to me, like both academically and personally. And that's really what has shaped my identity and like perspective going forward. So I definitely agree a lot with what Lucy said in the quote.
Cool. All right. So the second theme is around what it takes to be the best teacher for one of our twice exceptional learners. And we saw a lot of common themes across the blog posts about what really made a teacher one of the best teachers. And so the characteristics that came up were that they were very flexible and kind, understanding, respectful, non-threatening, non-judgmental, and supportive. And these things seem like they would be great characteristics for any child with their teacher, but I think they really mean a lot to twice exceptional kids, especially who are facing more bumps in the road. So kids who are neurotypical might be able to slide by with a teacher who doesn't do some of these things, but for a twice exceptional kid, these things are just really that much more important. And actually, these things are supported by research about creating environments for TUI and neurodivergent learners. So it was amazing really to see how well the bloggers' characteristics list lined up with what the research says these kids really need. Some of the actions that these best teachers took were like to modify or shorten homework. So like maybe you don't need to do 20 of the same math problem. Maybe doing 5 and showing you know how to do those 5 is enough. Extending deadlines. So, you know, like not taking off points if you can't make a specific deadline, but having a deadline maybe at the end of the quarter where you have a chance to get everything caught up. They really appreciated when the assignments are very clear, you know, clear instructions. They want a teacher who will answer questions and who will talk with the students. And some of the other ones are really about preventing ridicule. So a lot of these kids talk not just about being bullied by other kids, but by other adults in the schools. So just rude and unencouraging comments from other teachers or other staff. And so the best teachers really help to navigate some of that. And then they also celebrate their achievements. You know, so when the child does something well, they really notice that and really support the child in appreciating that. It's always best when these things are implemented for everyone in the classroom. most 2E and neurodivergent kids don't really want special treatment. They don't necessarily want to have accommodation. So it's great if we can just create learning environments that build many of these things in. And the other thing that really came up from at least two of our bloggers, Serena and Noah, is the power of having a teacher who is neurodivergent themselves. So having, especially I think in both cases of both Serena and Noah, they had teachers who had ADHD who really helped them to understand themselves and able to give much more clear instructions and make a connection with them. So one of the parts of this theme is that you have to be able to help proactively. This is a key thing that all the bloggers really ask for in terms of what makes the teacher really the best teacher. And the reason students say this is because a lot of them don't reach up for help, especially in those middle school and early high school years, because they are embarrassed sometimes about the struggles they're having, or they feel like in the context that they're in, it's not acceptable to need help, or they might feel ashamed that they need it, or they're just afraid of what will happen. So I think we need to keep this in mind, that it's not easy for students always to reach up for help. And so we need to be encouraging teachers to reach out to these kinds of students. And, you know, I think Ava said this so nicely when she said, my teachers didn't make me feel like the letters on my transcript defined my self-worth. They reached out their caring hands and offered an amount of help I had never experienced before. And that was her reflection on her middle college experience, that willingness of the teachers to reach out to her made such a difference, because when she was back at Gunn High School, before she did middle college, she was put into one of the special ed programs and she never felt comfortable there. And then she got to move to an environment where the teachers did much more reaching out and making sure that she was doing well. So Serena, did you want to throw anything into this before I move on?
Yeah, one thing I also noticed was like some of my most supportive teachers in the past were all, well, they didn't like actively try to make fun of students. They were all like eccentric in their own way, which they really embraced. So it didn't make like me feel like a huge outlier or anything like that. And as for also neurodivergent students, I went to Interlochen this past summer, and I had a trumpet teacher who just literally just told me, showed me what to do instead of giving me steps to tell me towards telling me what to do, and then like I would get confused within the steps. But for example, he told me to like play with an open throat, which I didn't really understand, because previous teachers I would always assume it was like opening a door with like a doorknob or something, and then wondering like, I don't have a doorknob in my throat, like how do I open it? So instead he demonstrated the actions that would allow me to achieve the same effect, which worked a lot better than just giving me a lot of random steps. So yeah, he was also neurodivergent, so he basically understood the way that I would receive the information better, and that was just what like really helped and really changed everything for like that summer at least.
Yeah, I loved what you said about that in your blog post about the screen. Yeah, it was like it was just the right thing for him to say to you, right? Not just try to explain the steps, but to be like, this is what it should feel like.
Yeah, like the feeling and telling me what to do like that.
Yeah,
is completely different, or I will perceive it completely differently, even though it'll always end up in like the same result, but I perceive it differently. So one way will not always end up in the other result.
Well, and I think I mentioned earlier that I went to a presentation yesterday from the Schwab Learning Center at Stanford, and they had this young woman who was dyslexic. And she also commented on how valuable it was to her when she worked with or had a teacher who also was dyslexic, because it just gives you that opportunity to relate to one another in a different way. All right. So there was also then a set of advice for teachers. We asked our bloggers what advice would they have for teachers, and also kind of like what one thing could a teacher do that would really help. And so we've talked about this one a little bit, is that listening to students. You know, really ask them as individuals what they need help with and how to remove the barriers to learning. So one of the things I loved that Serena said I'll quote you, Serena, was, "It's incredibly important to both discuss our disabilities and how it actually affects us, not just how you think it does." I love this. ADHD goes so much beyond can't sit, can't do work, must go zoom, zoom. I hate to break it to you, but that's not ADHD. That's my cat. So I think, that's just so important, both as parents and teachers, I think, to really listen to these kids when they're talking to us about what they're going through and what their experience of their learning difference is, because the experience of the learning difference is actually different for each person. And once you understand and are listening more to the child, then you can understand what the barriers are and start removing those as much as possible. And also teaching the child how to remove the barriers as well, starting to teach some self-advocacy skills so that they can start thinking about what is in their way and how can they create workarounds or solutions for those problems. Another thing that you really need to do is acknowledge both that the child has strengths and struggles. So you don't want to invalidate the struggles that they have. And you need to understand that even the brightest students can have a learning difference. So those accommodations that they need they are essential. The accommodations won't necessarily solve all of their challenges, but they're really important. So, Serena also went on to say, you can see she's a highly quotable blogger. "We're not trying to intentionally act out or underperform. Please never jump to conclusions or purposely invalidate our struggles." And then Mike wanted to note about his dysgraphia that just because he had an accommodation that allowed him to type rather than handwrite assignments, it's not like all of the other problems were magically fixed. Things just aren't designed for me. So you really have to understand that there are those strengths and those struggles, and support whatever those accommodations are that the child needs. The next one we talked about a little bit earlier, but was about providing those I skipped one. Let me go back. I don't want to skip. Offer choice and creative freedom, because I think this one is really key and possibly one of the most important things that we can do is to have some flexibility and give some choice. And this is because it really helps kids explore their interests. They need to have more choice in their projects, and they need to be able to demonstrate what they know beyond just a standard essay or a test. So often we aren't differentiating the exit points for students to show what they know, and we really should be. We should be giving kids more opportunities to explore what they're good at and then show that they've mastered something through a strength. So Ava said, "I learned so much more when I was allowed to do a project I was motivated to complete. It's challenging and sometimes impossible to accommodate every student's needs, but making it clear that you're there to help come up with ways for students to feel confident in the material is crucial." So I think you also see more motivation and more self-directed learning when we give more choice and creative freedom. We did talk about this a little bit earlier, which is about providing those step-by-step and clear instructions. This is so important because a lot of times the kids also need to see sample work and sample product so they know what they're aiming for. And, Mike really noted this when he said, "The best teachers are the ones who communicate clearly and make sure I understand what I need to be doing." And in the end, that's going to help everyone in the class if everyone sort of knows what they're aiming for. We talked about this earlier too, just the importance of checking in. Some of the kids who have ADHD or autism or anxiety, they may not be tracking all of the instructions that are given in class verbally as well as some of the other kids. So it's just important to check in and make sure that they understand what the expectations are. And then we've touched on this a little bit, but we really want to kind of focus on student mastery. What is our goal? What do we want kids to know and be able to do? And where are we putting in these false barriers that are just hoops they have to jump through? So you really want to adopt policies that use more of a standards-based grading approach that really reflect the mastery and learning objectives instead of just focusing on the completion of homework assignments. So you could do things like ask to have homework excused when mastery has been demonstrated through an assessment or a final project of some sort. Ask for shortened assignments. Ask if a teacher could accept late homework without penalty whenever possible. Chris reflected on this, that sometimes though, when they're given more time, even more days to turn in assignments doesn't help because they're perpetually behind, which inhibits learning content. So he requested, if I've scored well on an exam, but am behind on assignments, allow the flexibility, let me move on. And I think that's something we need to work on too, is why do we have these deadlines? When do kids need to learn about deadlines? We all have to deal with deadlines sometimes. So how do we build in the ability to learn about deadlines without having so many deadlines that all we end up feeling is that we're on a treadmill of being behind? Because I think we all know in real life, there are a lot of times when you can negotiate deadlines, or you get into a project, you realize it's going to take longer, you go back and you extend whatever that's going to take. And there are times when you have to do things on time. So how do we kind of introduce that kind of flexibility into the school environment as well? And then the last key tip they have was really asking teachers, please, to advocate for them. And this is also for parents too. You know, if you suspect that your child has an undiagnosed learning disability or some kind of mental wellness challenge, please advocate on their behalf for an evaluation. And this is even for high schoolers, because so often learning differences and learning needs of twice exceptional learners, especially for girls, are not caught early enough in their school life. And so we can think we've got to high school, oh, there can't be learning differences, but a lot of times some of the things that have been challenging through the years are due to the learning difference, and the child has been able to mask it well enough. And then the schoolwork demands, the social demands, the extracurricular demands of high school kind of create a wall and a new barrier that wasn't there before. So it's really important to keep your eye out for this and to advocate if your child needs an evaluation, and also for teachers to keep their eye out, because sometimes it's the parents who are presenting the barrier to getting the evaluation. And sometimes we need the teachers to be the advocate on behalf of their students. Serena, did you have anything you wanted to add?
That pretty much captured all I would have wanted to say, but I think one of the parts I really wanted to emphasize was advocating for learners, because sometimes it's such an unfamiliar concept when you first present it to parents that, like, if you don't explain it well enough, they're not going to know what they're getting into, and then they won't want to go into that because of like stigma or just general unfamiliarity with that subject. And it's really important to just break it down and then make sure that both parties know that it's not anything negative. It's just something that will make your life a lot easier, instead of something that is like a barrier or like a limitation or something that makes you any less than.
Yeah. Because I think what you all found too is sometimes it's what gives you your special capabilities as well, and your special viewpoints and empathy in life. So another key theme that really came up across the blog post is around equity. And several of our bloggers really emphasized a call to action around equity. Of the 6 contributors to our series, 3 graduated from private high schools, 1 graduated from our dual enrollment program, 1 from a charter school, and sadly, one of our bloggers hasn't graduated. So I think what they all kind of noted is that not everyone can afford a private school. Not everyone lives in an area where there is a school that's going to support learning differences or 2E students. There may be kids who live in a community that doesn't offer a better fit charter or dual enrollment program, or your parents may not have the resources, either time or financial or English language skills, to advocate year after year after year on your behalf. So the teens recognize this, and really Noah summed this up best, saying we really need more awareness on who and what a 2E student is, as too many people are living their lives believing that they are just dumb or don't have what it takes. And these people need help, not to correct their problems, but to overcome them. And then Ava really was talking about inequity. If we're not helping these kids, then what are we missing? We're missing a lot in our society and our world, because 2E and neurodivergent learners offer insane amounts of creativity, the ability to see things in a way that regular people can't, empathy, determination, enough knowledge to fill a library, and layer after layer of unseen talent. So it gives me chills to think that, these are the things that the teens in our blog series are thinking about. And I think it leads really well into letting Serena talk a little bit about the work she's doing, because what we're seeing is that as these kids become older, as they enter their late teen years and they start to feel more empowered around their own experiences, they really want to be making a difference in the world. Serena, did you want to talk a little bit about?
Yeah, so neurodiversity is a two-part pun on the word neurodiversity. Neurodiverse is basically someone who, well, delves deep into their brain as a neurodivergent individual would, and City is a supportive community of diverse individuals, and I like puns, so yeah, I made that the name. So it's an international resource and community platform for neurodivergent students that's also run by neurodivergent students, because I didn't see like a lot of those around. So it features support and community chat rooms, neurodiverse peer and adult mentorships, creativity showcases, education groups for allies, and resource and guide sheets. There's also an Instagram page in which I recount personal experiences and share advice through a variety of cat Photoshop stickers and also words. So basically, I just wanted to share the resources I wish I had access to it when seeking a diagnosis, and also create a community around that to mitigate the stigma, and also allow access to for other students who may also be seeking a diagnosis but don't know where to start. So if any of you are interested in checking it out, or you think your child will be interested in joining our student community or having a mentorship, the website is www.neurodiver-city.org. And there's a considerable amount of cats and cat photoshops on the website to welcome you too, if you're interested in that sort of thing. But yeah, would love to welcome you.
Yeah, there are always a few quotes that stand out from everybody's blog post, but I've already said this one, but it always stands out to me. That's not ADHD, that's my cat. I love that. I love all your cat photoshopping.
Thank you. She's in the back right now, actually, staring at a dove outside.
Well, now we'd like to open this up for question and answer. And for the question and answer, I'm actually going to stop sharing so we can all see each other. And if you don't mind putting your question in the chat, I will, if you have any questions for me about the blog series or about any of the themes that we've covered, if you have any questions for Serena, please feel free to weigh in. I actually have a couple of questions for Serena, and I'm going to get us kicked off. So Serena, now that you've seen how the themes played out across the bloggers, what resonates most for you?
I think the praise strong student part in elementary school, and then also having everything crash down in middle school, that resonated most with me, because that's the exact same situation that I went through. So I think middle school and high school is the age where your former compensating methods stop working as well, and then everything just kind of catches up to you and you're not sure what to do with it. But we won't always want to open up because we're afraid of punishment or any other negative consequences that like admitting that you're struggling will entail, rather than just saying, oh, hey, you're struggling with this, why don't we get like an evaluation? Yeah, we're just afraid of what will happen if we do in fact reach out for help. And then also teachers who make it a conducive space for asking questions like in class, versus teachers who crack down on you for asking questions because it seems like you weren't paying attention. That also makes a world of a difference, because for the former, then we would be more inclined to ask questions rather than just spending all our time on figuring everything out ourselves and then still not figuring it out, which is definitely something I have had a lot of experience with. And then another thing that really resonated with me was just the benefits that diagnosis allows, as well as the self-discovery and realization that comes with it, and how important it is to just know, and then like how much of a difference access to support can be that be from teachers or parents. But all the themes were definitely really, I related with, but those were just a few of the ones that stuck out most.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious, this is off the top of my head, but were there any that you were like, nah, that's not me?
I thought most of them were pretty relevant, other than like the identity part, which I feel like I completely identify it because it's shaped so much of like what I used to not know and then what I know now. So that, I think that was the only part that did not resonate, but like to each their own, of course.
Well, and it was just interesting because, you know, Mike was only 14, right?
Yeah,
Mike
I
was
think,
coming out of
yeah.
middle school when we wrote that blog post, and just in a different place developmentally.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. In middle school, I would be totally afraid of that also.
Is there anything that's important to you personally that didn't come up in the presentation?
Um, I think the things that the school sees, that's just the surface level of everything else that's going on. Like, for example, this was mentioned in the presentation, but if students are like acting out or not performing well, there's more to the story than just laziness or disrespect or whatnot. I've also had schools that like frame diagnosis as a burden, so that also made it very hard to get. So I was diagnosed in high school, and then I did not have like a smooth experience for attaining that diagnosis, because when I tried to reach out for help, I was deemed like overachieving and then just told to drop my hardest courses to compensate instead. But in middle school, I was pushed for a diagnosis because all my symptoms lined up with the typical Caucasian male hyperactivity cat zooming type. But in high school, I realized that's probably not what I should be doing. So that's when the masking starts coming up, and that's what made diagnosis a lot harder, because I finally stopped like aligning with the typical presentation, but then I also realized that, oh, hey, I kind of need help. And then that not aligning with that presentation barred me from like receiving that. So that was pretty important to me, but
Yeah,
just kind of wanted to go into a little bit more depth about that.
right. I have a few more questions here, but Jane has asked a question. Do you mind if I throw in one that is not
Yeah.
from our list from before? Jane is wondering, how do you overcome the I am normal kind of feeling, and why do I need to get a label to get assistance?
Okay, so that was something I definitely struggled with in middle school, and that was also a big part of why the evaluation did not happen in like kindergarten or middle school. So I would say it just takes a lot of time. There's like after a certain point, you have to accept that like, okay, I'm trying my hardest, but there's something that's limiting me in a sense, but like not limiting because I'm like dumb or any less than or something, but because well, I am capable of doing it, but I don't know how to do it. And then like that, I don't know how isn't something that can be solved by like tutoring or prep classes or like extra book studying and stuff. There's like a deeper story to that. And then for the other part of the question, why do I need a label to get assistance? Well, I wouldn't necessarily call it a label, because without that label of like a neurodivergent condition, I was given so many other labels, such as like disrespectful, like not caring, or dumb, or just anything pretty callous like that. I think that label is something that you will come to define yourself, and no one else can define that for you. And I think that's really important when you're trying to overcome that stage of like, hey, I don't really want to be identified as that, but that label is just something that will allow you to like achieve so much more. Like when you finally get the support you need, you'll realize that, hey, not everything has to be so hard, or I didn't have to spend like 19 hours on my homework and like sleep like 2 hours to just get like a simple understanding. But I know the label part is definitely a big fear for a lot of parents and students, especially at like younger ages. When you get older, I think people just stop caring because we're just too tired. But yeah, definitely the label is something that you define for yourself. It's what you make of it. And then I would just say like try to do like just try to pursue what you enjoy the most, and then that will also make you kind of forget about like the negative connotations of a label, like if any, because when you're pursuing what you truly enjoy, you'll find that like that doesn't hold you back at all. So yeah, I hope that was helpful in
Yeah,
some way.
that's awesome. And I think one of the things that came up again in this session I attended, and it's come up a lot of times, is there's a double-edged sword to labels, right? Because labels can be stigmatizing in some environments, and kids can feel marginalized, or people make, like you said, these assumptions about what ADHD means without diving deep into what it means for Serena. What does it mean for Serena to have ADHD, right? Because people make these assumptions, but labels are in our educational system as it stands right now, the path to get services and accommodations. So, you know, it's a double-edged sword, and it's tricky in that way. I thought it was interesting, this dyslexic woman I heard speak, she did not use her label a lot. What she did was she knew she was dyslexic, and then she used it as a way to understand herself and what her needs are, so that she could talk about what her learning needs were. So that as an adult, she says she rarely tells anybody she's dyslexic, but she knows how to talk about what she needs to be successful in a group, or what she needs to be successful in a certain environment, or what tools she should bring with her to be more successful in a meeting. So I think the label can help the individual to understand their needs better. And then we just have to work on focusing on kids' strengths, so that we can take away some of that stigma that comes with that seems to come with a label that we all wish did not come with the label. So
Yeah, I think going off of that, like, it's you don't have to disclose to anyone if you're not uncomfortable. I mean, if you're not comfortable with it, but I think it's really important to just know what you have to work with, and then also understand how you work with things. So yeah, for me, the label is something that like will prevent other people from getting like really mad at me, for example. So
well,
yeah.
and I noticed that Stacy then asked how we as parents encourage all students to not worry about the label. And I think this is very tricky as a parent, but there's a lot around what we can do in terms of emphasizing the strengths that come with whatever your child's unique neurodivergent makeup is, and a lot that we need to do to really focus on their strengths. And you know, it's that 80-20 rule. They should spend at least 80% of their lives in their strengths area, not focused on the disability. And so I think, you know, it depends on the age of your child too, Stacy. And so I don't know if you're coming to the lunch and learn, but we can certainly talk about that more, or you can reach out to me separately. I think, you know, it depends on if the child receives the label in elementary school, middle school, or high school, because they're at just different developmental stages. And so it can be harder, I think, to get the label in middle school or entering middle school. There's so much going on around your identity. So it really does depend a little bit. So be happy to talk, Stacy, about that with you. And then I noticed Stacy also asked, like, do we feel that we see more students of color in this category? I'm not sure if you mean, like, if you mean 2E. I mean, I think we do see, undoubtedly, there's a disproportionate number of kids of color who are given learning disability diagnoses, for sure. And there's a concept of person environment fit that I think we really are challenged by in our education system today, that many of our education organizations are not designed for kids who have certain behaviors, certain strengths, certain interests, certain ways of expressing themselves in the world. And so then when behaviors become what the adults in the lives don't want, they get labeled with a learning difference. And so I think that is definitely a core societal issue that we need to look at. I think there's a lot more that we at Real want to learn about helping kids, students of color. Because I think what tends to happen is their behaviors get labeled as a challenge more so than other kids. And so sometimes they're inappropriately diagnosed, or they are just really misunderstood in so many ways. And their strengths do not get emphasized in school like they should be. So somebody else wanted to know how the ADHD diagnosis impacted your social friendship side, if at all, and how you've dealt with that.
Honestly, I feel like it's changed throughout middle school and high school, like as things do. For middle school, it was more like I would be seeking attention, and then the validation that I did not receive in classes, I would achieve from like friends. Because I mean, like, well, with ADHD, it comes like spontaneity and also humor. But I think now it becomes a lot easier for me to like connect with other people and make friends, because there's no like set topic that we have to talk about. Like, I'll literally just talk with you about whatever. And then if we can keep a conversation going, then that's the vibe. And then that's how the friendship continues. I think like not having to limit yourself to like a like set formula to making friends or anything, that has really helped me with the friendship area. But that's also like something that you have to figure out. It's not in part it comes naturally, but it also doesn't, because you're not sure whether something is too much or if you'll scare them away or anything. But most of the time I think people are nice, and then yeah, that's a really scattered answer, but
Do you think it's helped, Serena, friendship wise, that you do have like a real strength in music, and you've been able then to join different bands and orchestras and participate in music programs, in terms of like finding people who have like interests or like thinking or will understand you better?
Oh, yes, yes. That has definitely orchestra. So I'm part of the Golden State Youth Orchestra, and that's where a lot of my closest friends I have found there. And it's just the things that make the friendship so special is like the little spontaneous things. And I think that I contribute to a lot of the spontaneous things that come up, which makes our connection really a lot stronger. So
I mean, I think it's such a good like real world example of how when we really help twice exceptional kids figure out the strength that they have and really their interest, and really go with that passion and find a way to nurture it, that then they'll meet other kids who have that common strength or interest area. And that's really the basis for a lot of friendship for your whole life. And so I think that just emphasizes the importance of giving kids room to really focus on their strengths and their interests, because it's so important, both like for your self-esteem, but also your social world. That's where you find your people. So a question that came in, I think is more for me, is there any formal diagnosis for 2E, or is anyone with autism, ADHD twice exceptional? I think that's a great question. And I'd say one of the things that we at Real say is, I am not going to tell you that your child is twice exceptional or not. Like, we know that the definition of twice exceptional kids are those kids who are very bright, very capable, high ability in some area, and also have a learning difference. And there is not like a formal diagnosis in the DSM-5. It's not a formal thing. I will say our neuropsych for my daughter, who is twice exceptional, she did put it in the report, like, Katie is a twice exceptional autistic, blah, 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 blah. So some neuropsychs are very familiar with it and can help you understand it, and some aren't as familiar with it. And we always just say, if the things we're saying resonate for you and your family, then, great, join us, learn more, be part of our community. There are some communities where they still identify for gifted and talented programs. And in that case, you might then have a child who qualified for a gifted and talented program and also has a learning difference. A lot of the things that we believe in and are arguing and advocating for around strengths-based learning would really be good for everyone. The challenge is that there are a lot of myths and misconceptions around whether you can be a very bright, high achieving child and also have a learning difference, or be in special education and also have a brightness or a strength in a core area. And a lot of people just don't understand that these things can coexist. And so our goal is to really help people break through some of the myths around that, because, like I said, even this woman who was in her mid-20s yesterday, who has dyslexia and graduated from Stanford, didn't feel like she could have both. Didn't know this was her own personal experience. She didn't even know that she could have both. So it's important that we recognize this and build awareness around this life experience. So I hope that answers that question. And I see Beth asked, are the students still blogging, and is this series available? And then Hua put up the link. So thank you so much. The series is still available, and I'm going to share my screen again and show you one thing while I ask my last question for Serena, which is, do you mind sharing your hopes, dreams, and plans for your own future? Because I'm sure now that everyone's gotten to know you better, they want to know what you have in mind.
Yeah, so I will be attending Columbia University in the city of New York this fall. And I've actually struggled over this decision for a long while because I'm super attached to routine and kind of terrified of leaving everything behind right as I've started to get comfortable with it, just like I did in middle school. But I think with this diagnosis I have now and the support I've gained along the way, I'll be much better equipped to take on something new than I was previously. So at Columbia, I'll definitely continue to study my music and neurodiversity advocacy endeavors there. really not too sure what I'll be studying yet, but hopefully it'll be something with psychology, music, and then maybe branching into some business administration. But yeah, no matter what, I will keep working on and expanding neurodiversity. And then I know that these passions are what I truly do want to continue for like as long as I can.
Well, and I just think you'll find so many more ways to advocate as you move through your life, right? And through different environments. And you have such a strong voice. And I hope you bring that everywhere you go. You just have so many powerful things to share and say. And so kind of to Beth's point, if you want to get involved with the project, we definitely welcome more contributions from teen bloggers. We have a very easy to use template that if they just have to answer questions, and then we help them shape it into the final version. Or if they're not comfortable writing the responses, especially those kids who are dyslexic or have dysgraphia, we can interview them, and then we can draft the post and they can review it. And you can contact me at callie@realpaloalto.org if you have a child who you think would be interested in participating. So I just want to check the chat one last time. We need to log off in about 3 minutes, but Serena, since we have 3 minutes, I had given you a set of questions and we didn't get to all the questions that I wanted to ask you. And I don't know if there were any of those that you were dying to answer. Or if you're like, nah, I'm good. It's all good.
I can answer the advice one, perhaps.
Yeah, so I basically said this presentation is being attended mostly by parents. What one piece of advice would you give them in working with their twice exceptional or neurodivergent children?
Yeah, I think what I wanted to say for that was just listen to your child and just try to understand them. I know there's usually a lot of pressure about like academics doing well, getting into a good college. I know because I come from like a school district that was like that, and a culture that sort of internalizes that as well. So there's a lot of pressure for that. But I think oftentimes, especially for neurodivergent learners, when parents see something unfavorable, they freak out and try to stop that behavior immediately, either by punishment or active discouragement, which is not ideal. And which is also why I kind of hid my struggles growing up. But basically, don't stress too much about the little things and take things one step at a time, because neurodivergency is dynamic. Like something that you can't do right now doesn't mean you cannot do it later. And this sounds like super generic advice, but everything will work out in the end. And there's no single path to success. Your child will succeed, but what works for a neurotypical child won't necessarily have the same effect on your neurodivergent child as it would for a neurotypical, or it might not work as well. But it really is just a journey of discovery. And most of the time we won't know how to navigate it either, but it would be amazing if we could be just supported in the process of figuring that out. Like, it doesn't matter if you also don't know what we're doing, but the support from someone like we trust and we know that will want the best for us really just means the world. So yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Serena, for being here and for sharing your insights. I always learn something new every time I hear you speak or read what you've written or talk to you. Jane has a question about supports you've gotten that are helpful, but what I'm going to do is, Serena, if you're willing to come to the Lunch and Learn, we'll move that question into the Lunch and Learn, because I'm supposed to wrap this up now, and encourage everyone to go to the Lunch and Learn. And again, you should have the links to the Lunch and Learn in the email schedule you received or back at the original website. So thanks everyone for coming. It was great to have you here, and hopefully we'll see some of you over at our Lunch and Learn. Bye.